All right. It is 8 o'clock a.m. here on the West Coast. And so let's go ahead and start today's webinar. Today, we're really excited to have Dr. Edwin Reidel and Anthony Hurst from Progeny Drone here to speak with us. And today, the topic of discussion is going to be phenotyping in small plot agronomic field trials. And they'll be talking about some of the emerging technologies for the rapid collection of actionable data. Okay, so I just want to make sure, can everyone hear me? Is everyone able to hear me in the chat? Seems like I might have some issues with my microphone. Okay. All right, so today, let's get some introductions out of the way and some housekeeping stuff. So we're going to start with introducing our webinar moderator, Susie Truitt. She's our distributor manager at CID Bioscience. She's been with the company for 8 years, and she'll be the one responding to all of your chats and any issues you might be having with technical difficulties. She'll be the one moderating that. She'll also be posting relevant links into that chat. Anything that might be posted in the actual presentation that you can't physically click on will actually be posted in that chat. So make sure you're monitoring that chat for those links. So to get some housekeeping out of the way, please, for all questions you might have that have anything to do with the presentation, the content of the presentation, for those questions, please use the Q&A function. That's what we will be checking at the end of the webinar to actually answer those questions. We will not be looking at the chat. We'll be looking at the Q&A function. So if you see your screen, there is a Q&A box on the bottom right of the screen. And so please use that function for any sort of questions you might have. And please refrain from using the chat unless you are experiencing some kind of technical difficulties. So if you can't hear me or if you can't hear our guest speakers, if the video is not working, if the presentation is not working, please notify us on the chat for any sort of difficulties like that. And then, as I mentioned, Susie will be posting any links you might need or any sort of extra supplementary information. That will all be in the chat. So to introduce myself, my name is Galen George. I'm an application scientist here at CID Bioscience. I have a bachelor's degree in biochemistry and a master's degree in food science from Michigan State University. I am an IFT certified food scientist, and my previous work was working in the analytical food industry, working in laboratory setting, also doing some consultation for food safety work in the manufacturing, and the produce and cannabis industries. So today, what we're going to be talking about, after getting those introductions out of the way, we'll dive right into Dr. Reidel's talk about small plot trial work and UAVs, and talk about current practices that are being used, and then how UAVs can kind of provide an unbiased and actionable data set to improve the effectiveness of your small plot trials. From there, we'll kind of transition to talking about how ground-based data can supplement and complement any kind of measurements made with UAVs. And then we'll end with a Q&A session where we'll, both myself, Dr. Reidel, and Anthony Hurst will be talking to you and answering your questions directly. So the man of the hour is Dr. Edwin Reidel. He works for CID Agtech and Progeny Drone. He has over 30 years of experience in plant science and has advanced degrees from UC Davis and Cornell. For the last decade, he's been focusing on connecting plant scientists with technologies to advance their research. So he previously worked for CID Bioscience and Lemnitech, and now he's dividing his time between the two startups, CID Agtech and Progeny Drone, Inc. And so we're really excited to have him here today. And Edwin, I'm going to go ahead and pass over control to you and go ahead and let you start your discussion today on the UAVs.
Thank you, everyone, for attending this webinar, and thank you to Galen, Susie, and everybody at CID for the opportunity to present things I've been doing with my efforts at Progeny Drone Incorporated. A bit about Progeny Drone. It was co-founded at Purdue University by Dr. Anthony Hurst and Professor Katie Rainey. Anthony was a grad student in ag and bioengineering, and he was doing some of his research in Katie's soybean breeding program. The patents for what is now called Plot Phoenix were filed via the Purdue Office of Technology Commercialization. Katie and I have a connection through Cornell where we were both graduate students, and that's how I became involved with the company. I met Katie and Anthony at the Pheno meeting in 2019 in Tucson, which was about the last thing I did before the COVID lockdowns. And we agreed to work together. And so we've had a virtual relationship since our one in-person meeting ever since. So about small plot field trials, I was surprised, and I think you may be surprised to know that tens of thousands of these trials are planted every year globally, and they contain tens of millions of individual plots. In fact, one of the big global ag biotech companies plants over 10 million plots itself every year. Currently, this is the only way to select which genetic backgrounds rank highest for various agronomic traits in a given location. This is known as genotype by environment interaction or phenotypic plasticity. Of course, yield is the main thing that these trials are planted for, but there's a lot of data collected in other ways as well. Small plot trials are also used to optimize plant population for elite varieties, to identify which parents are compatible in hybrid seed production, and to test crop inputs. It's a massive and complicated undertaking, and it requires specialized equipment for planting, as you see in the top left, harvesting in the bottom left, also maintenance such as spraying. Also, the spraying can itself be the treatment sometimes. And the data acquisition has traditionally been done by hand. In the top right, you can see a team performing stand counts of corn in a field. And in the middle is a breeder doing observations and visual ratings. In many cases, detailed observations of every subrow or plot is impossible due to time and resource constraints. It also has to be considered that aside from trained and experienced personnel, human observation is prone to error due to observer fatigue and the limits of human perception. So can drones help out and help the agronomists, breeders, and crop research organizations get the most out of their field trials? Well, with the introduction of small unmanned aircraft systems and FAA rules for flying them, there was a wave of hype over possible applications, including in production agriculture and also in small plot research. One of our challenges today with people we talk with is overcoming the disillusionment felt by many from their early experiences. The hardware early on was sometimes stunningly expensive. It was difficult to operate. It required costly accessories like ground control points to improve the location accuracy. Sometimes these systems crashed hard and could not be repaired, and your investment went down in flames. And in many cases, the data was unusable without a GIS expert who could string together multiple GIS applications to stitch the images, overlay a grid of the plot layout, and extract measurements. So around this time, our co-founder, Anthony Hurst, pictured here, was learning drones the hard way, and he was also developing some software to do it better. And thus, Plot Phoenix was born. So in the last few years, UAV hardware, like most technologies, has fallen in price. The resolution has increased dramatically, And off-the-shelf UAVs now come with excellent cameras mounted on motorized gimbals. They possess crash avoidance features and are capable of fully automated flight so that you don't actually even need to touch the drone. The missing piece of the puzzle was a SIGL software package for image stitching, overlaying plot layout grids, and extracting data. Plot Phoenix aimed to fill this void. It is easy to use so that you don't have to upload your images to the cloud and wait for third parties to process and analyze the images. It also works with standard GPS. There's no need to purchase and lug around expensive ground control points. And Plot Phoenix runs on your local computer without internet access, so it can be used in the field on a laptop. In fact, we encourage our users to install it on a laptop so that they can stitch their images at the field's edge. This way, the pilot knows that they got the data they wanted before leaving the field. Okay, starting my video. Okay, hello everyone. So I just wanted to show you, for example, the kind of UAV that you can now use in your small plot field trial research. This one is made by DJI. It's the Mavic 2 Pro. It comes with a 20 megapixel camera. It has a massive 1-inch sensor, which is mounted on a motorized gimbal so that when you're flying, the camera can remain pointed straight down, which is enormously helpful for further image stitching and analysis. And it has a lot of handy sensors so that you can avoid hazards and collisions and crashing. So I just thought I'd show you that. This is a very nice system, and I think it costs around $1,600. It's the one that we recommend to people when they come to us asking for a UAV recommendation. So now I'd like to show a brief video demonstrating stand counting with Plot Phoenix so that you can get an idea of how easy and powerful it is.
Example, let's compare stand counts done traditionally versus using Phoenix. It takes an intern about 10 seconds to count 30 plants, so about 3 plants per second. Here's how you do this with Phoenix. First, capture imagery shortly after emergence when there's about 2 leaves on each plant. Then, open Phoenix and select the folder with your images, and check boxes for the process steps and metrics you want to get out of the images, and hit Start Processing. Phoenix will stitch about 1 image per second on a laptop, so you can know you got good images before leaving the field. Phoenix also provides tools that makes it easy for you to grid your experiment and adjust for planting errors, to the point where you can specify exactly what portions of each subrow you want your measurements to be done on. Then, within about 10 minutes, you've got your stand counts tabulated in an Excel spreadsheet along with various diagrams to help you evaluate the quality of your results. For example, Phoenix marks every plant inside your measurement zone with a white plus sign. It also marks skips with red minus signs and doubles with blue plus signs. It also creates heat maps so you can quickly evaluate which plots are doing well. And of course, you get Excel spreadsheets with summary statistics for each plot for every metric you check the box for. Here we counted 5,400 plants in about 600 seconds, so that's 9 plants per second, 3 times faster than the intern.
All right, so do you see my presentation again? I think you should.
Yep.
Okay, good. In addition to stand counts, Plot Phoenix extracts other valuable measurements. And here is an overview of those metrics, along with guidelines for the flying height necessary to achieve the required image resolution, which is portrayed in the last 2 columns. Row length is a measurement of how much of the row or subrow within the measurement zone specified by the user or researcher that is covered by vegetation. This is a good proxy for emergence and early vigor in species which are less conducive to stand counting. So species where the plants are seated closely together and there's no good separation between the individual plants in an image as they are germinating and developing. Vegetation height is our newest metric, and I'm going to talk about that in a subsequent slide. Vegetation color includes measurements of, for example, greenness related to nitrogen status, or yellowing, which can be signs of chlorosis or senescence maturity, and so on. You might also use it to detect disease symptoms. Phoenix can output vegetation indices such as NDVI, NDRE, green leaf index, and others. And the last row is vegetation cover. These measurements made over time can be used to estimate growth rate during canopy development. And it's simply a measure of the fraction of the total ground area versus the ground area that's covered with vegetation. So when you're flying your drone, you might be flying as low as 10 meters and as high as 45 meters, depending on the data that you want to extract. And also the image resolution of the sensor that you have on your drone. And we can help you with those kinds of calculations. Although Plot Phoenix supports most multispectral sensors, we vigorously promote the use of RGB cameras and imagery. One reason for this is simple. It's that most of the outputs using UAVs can only be extracted from color images. This list includes stand counts, row length, and plant height metrics. One of the reasons for this is that only RGB cameras provide sufficient resolution. There's other reasons as well. So multispectral sensors sacrifice resolution for the capability to capture more narrow bandwidths reaching into the NIR spectrum. And most of the researchers we talk with want to calculate these popularized vegetation industries that require multispecs such as NDVI and NDRE. However, we have actually seen little evidence that multispectral offers an advantage over RGB-based metrics such as the green leaf index. And in some cases, the visual indexes might even be better than the multispectral ones. In addition, multispectral imagers can be very expensive and the imaging is more challenging to process. So if you're thinking about which sensor to use or to purchase, I'd encourage you to go over to the Plot Phoenix blog and check out the post based on Dr. Rainey's insights from years of using drones in her soybean breeding program at Purdue. Phoenix is the only application which generates multiple images of every plot taken from different camera perspectives during UAV flight. We call these plot clips. In addition to offering greater precision for standard metrics, with plot clips, the software can compute 3D information from 2D images. The images shown here represent a single plot clip on the left of a soybean field trial plot. And on the right, I show you an animation of the corresponding 3D model, which was generated from all of the plot clips for that plot. And Plot Phoenix can do this for every plot in a trial. So it's pretty impressive. It's the newest feature of the software, and we are making it available free to use for our existing and new subscribers this year. Finally, many researchers want to get more data from their field experiments than might be possible from the air. So I think there are many opportunities to gather data that is more specific and detailed from the ground. And I think these two systems are complementary rather than exclusive. So I outlined some ideas that I came up with. Galen and others may have additional thoughts. So at the leaf or canopy level, UAV measurements are averaged over the canopy. These are not spot measurements on a leaf. So on the ground, you can make those spot measurements with, for example, a chlorophyll meter. You can measure photosynthesis with a gas exchange system, and you can calculate leaf area index with a meter. So for example, you might want to measure the flag leaf, which is commonly done on crops such as wheat or corn. And then there's the roots, which have always been difficult to study. With the UAV, roots are not possible. I don't see a way that that's ever going to be possible, but I'll never say never. From the ground, a lot of research teams do shovelomics, where they actually dig up plants and make measurements of the root crowns, as pictured here. And it's also possible to do in situ imaging below ground of root growth and dynamics. On the flowering and reproductive end, UAVs offer the potential to do flower and fruit detection and counting, and these are features that are under development for plot Phoenix. With the UAV, we can also calculate tree count and size, which is also a coming feature for plot Phoenix. And additional things that can be done with ground measurements would be, for example, chemometrics or colorimetrics that would be done with spectroscopy and near infrared spectroscopy. So for example, estimating the ripeness, the soluble solids, the sweetness of fruits using contact sensors instead of destructive sampling. So thanks for attending my part of the webinar. We'd be happy to provide further information about using UAVs in small plot research. I know Anthony is responding to some of the chat in the Q&A, and we will also answer your additional questions at the end of this webinar. And we also encourage you to visit our website and schedule a Plot Phoenix demo specifically for your application and even with your images, which we'd be happy to do a complimentary demo with. And with that, I will pass the control back to Galen at CID.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Reidel. Really appreciate that talk. I will go ahead and kind of wrap up the rest of the presentation here. So as Dr. Reidel mentioned, there is a complementary aspect of the ground-based data to this UAV data that you can get, and it kind of gives you a better full picture analysis, right? It's a more holistic approach. And there are cases, as he mentioned, with the multispectral cameras that there are issues with lower resolution. There's also cases where you just might need greater accuracy, or there might be factors like soil properties, weeds, or other things that are interfering with your UAV measurements where you need a more specific targeted approach. And so the UAVs can also help identify those areas that might need those more precise measurements. So if you notice that you're not getting, if you're getting interference from the soil or from other plants, or if you're noticing that there's a specific area that you kind of are noticing that there's might be disease symptoms and you want to analyze that further, then you can actually go ahead and use handheld ground-based data measurements in order to complement that UAV data and provide you that greater resolution and provide you that more confidence in what's happening in your plants in these small plot trials. And so because these help isolate the plant part, from the rest of its surroundings, and you can actually measure directly exactly what you want to measure. And as Dr. Reidel mentioned, the things that can be measured easily are spectral properties. So instead of relying on just RGB, you can use an actual spectrometer in the near infrared range to look at not just RGB indices, but if you wanted to look at indices that are in the NIR spectrum, you could then use an instrument like that. You could also still use it for pigment estimation, micronutrient estimation with chemometrics. You can also use instruments for LAI to complement the canopy cover measurements. And then you can also look at root development, which is the one thing, probably the one aspect that, as Dr. Reidel mentioned, we're pretty far out from ever seeing an actual situation where a UAV will be able to actually measure root development and growth. So just to kind of talk to you guys about some solutions that there are out there for these ground-based measurements. We have a SpectraView leaf spectrometer, and this device is a newly redesigned device from us, at CID Bioscience. And this gives plant researchers the ability to collect data in real time. And this is data that is across the visible and near infrared, the shortwave near infrared spectrum. And so the spectra that you can collect can be used in a number of ways. There are a lot of built-in indices such as NDVI, GLI, and then other, like water index and other indices that are used to analyze plant stress and other conditions, greenness from nitrogen, as Edwin mentioned. And then also you can use the raw spectra to perform chemometric analysis and create models to quantify things like chemical concentrations, micronutrient concentrations, and actually look at study some photochemical reactions that are happening. And so that's what's a nice thing about this instrument. It's kind of an all-in-one spectrometer. It gives you that visual feedback of here are some indices to look at, but it also gives you that raw data that you could possibly use to then use further for chemometric modeling. And so here's just some better summary of those applications that I just kind of discussed. So looking at NDVI, PRI, or the water index, or any sort of index, you can actually create your own custom indices if you are researching and you find that there's a certain index that is not in the previous literature that you want to input into the device yourself and have it automatically calculate. It can easily do that. Also, as I mentioned, phytochemicals, looking at chlorophyll, chlorophyll A and B, looking at beta carotene, looking at anthocyanins. And then also it has been used and it can be used in the manner of actually deploying a chemometric model to look at micronutrient content. So looking directly at nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, calcium or magnesium concentrations. And then as far as the LAI measurements are concerned, the CI110 canopy imager is a great tool for rapid data collection of LAI, all non-destructive again. And so with this device, you would just simply, it's based on a hemispherical photography. So it's all under the canopy and you will just go around and be able to take rapid measurements that will give you a gap fraction LAI estimation, as well as a number of other data points, things like PAR LAI, your average PAR readings, sunflex, canopy density readings, and things of that nature. So, and it's also a very adjustable tool. You can add filters manually or directly on the device. You can actually digitally add filters as well if you have varying conditions, such as cloudy skies or very sunny skies, in order to help differentiate between your canopy and the sky. And so there's a lot of great options as far as that is concerned, and that will help complement the UAV data, the canopy cover data, and give you a non-destructive rapid LAI measurement. And then as far as roots are concerned, the most exciting new way, as opposed to shovelomics, as Edwin mentioned, now we can actually visualize these roots and monitor them over time using in situ root imaging systems, such as our CI 600 and 602. And so this device actually allows you to monitor at whatever intervals you want. You can monitor over as long of a period of time as you want. You can monitor these roots from before planting all the way through, multiple seasons. You can also install these tubes in existing plants or existing plots, and then allow the roots to recover from that stress, and then start monitoring them as well. And this will help you monitor for things like, root growth, root dieback, and also really new emerging research to help people identify diseases before they actually start showing symptoms out on the leaves. So even before you start noticing any sort of symptoms on the plant itself, you can actually start to see those, happening down in the roots themselves. And so this is a really easy system. All it takes is installing those clear tubes, and then the scan head itself rotates in 360 degrees, takes an image of anything that's within a couple millimeters of that tube, and then you'll get those images. You can stitch them together so you can get a time-lapse image, kind of in a similar way of the Plot Phoenix, where there are softwares out there, and we also have one that we provide with the instrument that allows you to stitch those images together really easily, trace those roots, and get all this sort of root dimensions that you might need. And so it's a great tool for looking at the root images without having to do any sort of destructive analysis like what would be classically required with shovelomics. And there's also other instruments out there. We also, as far as the chemometrics of looking at fruit maturity. So if you're actually looking at crops that do produce fruit, then we also do have on the Felix instrument side of things, we have instruments that do provide non-destructive readings for fruit maturity clearance standards, things like dry matter, soluble solids contents, titratable acidity. So that those are also out there and available to use for ground measurements as well. But just to summarize what we talked about today, so we talked about, Dr. Reidel touched on the standard procedures in small plot trial work, how the current practices are expensive, require a tremendous amount of labor. That one image where there's 7 or 8 people out there doing stand counts, you can reduce all of that by just having a single unmanned drone do an automated flight and take some images and have the software, the Plot Phoenix software, do all those calculations for you. That's the new and emerging technology, and it's finally mature enough to actually implement and use in practice. It's no longer just kind of a theoretical technology, which is really nice to see that the advances in the actual drones themselves and the advances in the software has now allowed for that better accessibility to that data. So you don't need that GIS expert anymore to stitch together those images. You just need the drone, and it can be a completely automated flight. You don't even need the expert drone pilot anymore. So it's really awesome that this has become such a more accessible technology for everyone, especially for these small plot trials, especially when there's so many of them, tens of millions. Like, I can't imagine how much time that would take for any single group of people to have to go and manually do stand counts. The man hours involved alone is astronomical. And then we just touched on some ground-based data for the more holistic picture. So the idea is, you can use these UAVs, and then if you need a more in-depth analysis and you want a better picture of exactly what's happening, maybe it's disease symptoms, maybe it's something else. Maybe you're just trying to look at how an exact treatment is influencing a certain micronutrient within the plant. Those can all be complemented with this ground-based data from handheld instruments like the SpectraView leaf spectrometer, like the CI110 canopy imager, or the CI600 or 602 root imagers. So those can all provide that complementary data to help establish that kind of bigger picture. And then finally, obviously, if you have any questions, if you want more information about these exciting new technologies and how they can be implemented in your specific application or in your current systems, you can always feel free to reach out to Dr. Reidel at Progeny, Anthony, Dr. Hurst at Progeny as well. I'm sure is happy to talk about how to implement these technologies into your current systems. We at CID Bioscience are always happy to discuss that. Especially if these are new applications that no one's really tried yet. Those are always really exciting for us. So yes, so we're always here to help support and collaborate with you to make sure that these technologies work for you. And lastly, here's just some information about how to get connected with us at CID Bioscience and at CID Agtech, and also Progeny Drone. We posted that earlier. Edwin had a slide earlier that showed the Progeny Drone website. But if you want to get in contact with him at CID Agtech, there's a website as well for that. For us, you can contact us at our website. That's the best place to get news updates and updates on what we're currently doing. We also send out newsletters. So if you do, I would highly encourage you signing up for our newsletter in order to get updates in real time about what projects we're working on. And you can also follow us on social media, on Twitter, on Facebook, or on LinkedIn to see what's happening and what we're working on at our headquarters in Camas, Washington. So we're going to go ahead and end this with a question and answer session. And how this is going to work is I'm going to open the Q&A box and I will read the questions back out loud. And then Edwin, you can also open the Q&A box, and Dr. Hurst, you as well can just open it and see the question that I'm reading. And then if it's something that is addressed to you, I will just kind of pass it on to you guys and let you answer it. If it's something that's more addressed towards the CID side of things, I will, the CID bioscience side of things, I will absolutely answer that as well. If you guys do want to get more information or get a quote, please click the tiny URL link that's going to be posted in the chat. You aren't going to be able to physically click the one that's in this presentation, but we will repost that in the chat. And so if you do want more information on quotes, more information on anything that we talked about today, please click that link. So I'm going to go ahead and open the Q&A here. And we're going to go ahead and start with the very first question is, can I get a certificate for this training? And so this is a question for me, I would think. So there isn't a certificate for this training per se. We can send you a confirmation email that says that you participated in this webinar or that you attended this webinar if that is something that your employer requires. So please let us know. Please email me directly if that's something that your employer requires of you, and I will be happy to send a confirmation email to you that says you attended this webinar. The next question is, what about fluorescence measurement for photosynthesis? And so I'm not sure if this is directed at ground-based measurements or UAV-based measurements, but I can answer for the ground-based. There are lots of systems out there for fluorescence measurements for photosynthesis as far as handheld tools are concerned. But I think it would be more interesting, and I'm not actually quite sure of the answer, to hear from Dr. Reidel about the possibilities of fluorescence measurements with the use of drones. Is that something that's technologically here yet, or are we not quite there yet?
That is something. There are ways to measure chlorophyll fluorescence kinetic parameters remotely. That's not something that's currently available using drones, so definitely best still to do that using ground-based technologies.
Yeah. Do you foresee that ever being a possibility with the drone technology?
I don't see why not. It would require the drone to be able to hover relatively still over a point and send down the signal and receive the reflectance signal. So it would be tricky, but I wouldn't say it's impossible.
Right. All right. Awesome. Thank you. The next question is, are the presentations available as a digital files PDF? The presentation will be sent out as a link, I believe, soon, within 24 hours after we conclude, once we get the recording rendered. As far as the PDF is concerned, I can certainly make my slides available as PDF, and I'm sure Dr. Reidel can easily save his presentation as PDF as well. We can make that a possibility. If you do want that, go ahead and please email us and request that, and then we can get that to you. The next question is Phoenix an open source software or is it just commercial? So I'll let you guys address that one.
Yes, so Plot Phoenix is a commercial application. We're a shoestring startup and quickly growing. We are aiming to reach the segment of the market that doesn't have coding skills or skills to use, say, R software, the R package or things like that. So it's people who need a ready-to-go application that's more point and click than code and debug. So if you're looking for open source packages, those are available. That's just not the business that we're in.
All right. Thank you.
I'm going to chime in here real quick, Galen, and ask, there's a number of questions that are being posted in the chat. If people can post those questions in the Q&A.
Oh, yes, please. If you are posting questions, please post those in the Q&A box as opposed to the chat. All right. Susie, do you actually want me to open the chat after I'm done addressing these questions in the Q&A function and just to make sure that I'm getting all the questions, or are we just gonna try to paste those over from the chat to the Q&A box?
it's looking like people are questions in the Q&A that had posted in the chat.
Okay.
But there are the 5 questions answered were answered by Anthony during the presentation, so we'll want to go back when we're done with these questions.
Okay. All righty. Well, I will go ahead and continue with the Q&A box then. And so the next question is another one that's probably for Dr. Reidel is, do simple GPS metrics, are they sufficient to precise location of the images? I am not 100% certain what that question is asking, but you might know.
So I'm not precisely sure either. The onboard GPS units that come with UAVs do not provide precise location. For that, you would need to use ground control points or RTK GPS. However, with Plot Phoenix software, we don't require that more exact spatial information. So we're able to stitch the images together and grid them without the GCP or the RTK GPS. So we can just use the information that's recorded in the image file by the drone to do all the mapping.
Awesome. And then a follow-up question that's also going to be for you guys is, can I export the graphs from the software?
Yes, of course. And the software also exports all of the data in spreadsheet form or CSV files, which can be imported into database software as well. So however you want to analyze your data, it's available to you.
Great, thank you. And then the next 2 questions look like they are for me. So the first question is, when and how do you deploy the CI600 in the field? And what's actually funny is that Dr. Reidel can actually answer some of these questions as well, as he has some experience with all of these instruments. But the CI600 can be deployed at any time. The one caveat to that is that if you install the tubes before you actually start to plant, and before you plant, then you don't have to worry about waiting for the roots to then resettle. You don't have to worry about after that kind of stress the roots. You don't have to wait, a longer period of time in order to get accurate root measurements and allow those roots to regrow back around the tube. So it's always, the best case scenario is to install those tubes before you plant, but that isn't always possible for most applications. And so when you actually install those tubes, you just simply have to wait for the soil to settle, for that stress reaction to kind of go away after that initial shock of kind of coring out a hole right where those roots were. And then you just have to wait, and at least 4 weeks, maybe even up to 2 months in some cases, I would say. And then from there, you can actually start to take your images, and then you can take them as often as you want. But we do, if for the best case scenario, so you don't have to wait, it is best to install them prior to planting, if that is a possibility. The next question is about the SpectraView. And then the question is, the SpectraView can manage new models, or is it already set up for some nutrients? Thanks. So the SpectraView does not have any nutrient models on it currently. That is mostly because when you go to, there's not going to be any kind of universal model possible for that works across all plant species. So because of the nature of NIR spectroscopy, it actually is going to be better to make a more targeted model for the specific crops or specific plants that you are working on. And so it would not be very beneficial to have, for instance, a corn, a model for corn plants that allows for measurement of micronutrients, and then have someone try to use that on spinach. It's probably not going to work as accurately. So the SpectraView requires the user to build those models themselves. But thanks for that question. That's a great question. The next question, this is going to be directed towards Edwin, and it looks like Anthony's also typing an answer here. I appreciate the guidance on RGB usefulness. That is a new insight to my understanding. Still, can you possibly provide a short list of sensor systems you recommend for NIR collection? It sounds like your methodology would tend to rely on both XS and RGB sources, since you mentioned NDVI and other indices fairly often.
Okay, yeah, I'd be curious to see what Anthony's response was to that. As far as specific system recommendations, I think that would be best done with a one-on-one consultation that can be scheduled on the website. Mm-hmm. And I do mention NDVI and RGB. Those can be done separately with just the standard RGB sensor that comes with most off-the-shelf drones. NDVI can be done with some off-the-shelf drones, such as the DJI Phantom with the multispectral. So it just really depends on your application. They can be done captured simultaneously or separately, and we'd be happy to discuss those with you in a different meeting.
Yeah. Yeah, so for a lot of these, for any very specific questions, we always will recommend that you contact us directly to schedule a one-on-one consultation. And so if you do have more specific questions about your application, then those might be best served by actually scheduling a consultation with one of us. And we are more than happy, Dr. Reidel is more than happy to answer questions for Progeny drone. If you have questions about the CID instruments and your specific application, I am more than happy to schedule a consultation with you as well.
May I add a quick remark to that last question? This is Anthony.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Galen. Just really quickly, I wanted to point out, Edwin mentioned one option with that new DJI multispectral system, but there are many options available on the market that people aren't aware of. Some cost much less than that particular sensor and are easier to work with. So please, again, like Galen said, reach out to us and we can help find, the most cost-effective option for you if you really need NDVI. That's it.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Hurst.
And I will also add that in the chat, I'm putting the links to contact Progeny, as well as I'll again be posting their email addresses.
Thank you, Susie. The next question that we have is about the CI 600 and 602. So it's just asking, can you quickly go over dormancy measurement with CI 600 and 602? So the actual data output of the CI 600 and 602 is just images. And so how you actually use those images in any sort of measurement that you want to do is really up to the user. It's so basically all the data output is images of your roots, and you can take them at whatever, frequency, whatever intervals you want to take them at, to then assess with your own, either with our software, with a different software where you actually trace roots, or with your own eye maybe, or whatever kind of system you want to go with. That's how you're going to, the actual, there's no, I guess, specific measurement tool or device from our systems that are going to give you anything beyond actual root measurements. So the actual looking at dormancy or looking at growth, that's just going to be up to you to observe over time and do those measurements and see how much roots have grown or have not over time. And so that's my answer for that question. The next question I have here is, how close should the root imaging tool be to the root? How does it work for deep roots? You can install really deep tubes if you have really deep roots. Like if you have one really big tap root, it's a very large root system, you want to be able to access that, then you can install a very long tubes if you want to. It's just going to require more, it's going to take longer to take more images because the scan head is a fixed length. So you're going to have to take multiple images as you reach the lower depths. And so how close the root tube should be to the actual root. Typically, the most we can actually get penetration wise is about a couple of millimeters into the soil. So if the root is not within a couple millimeters of the tube itself, it's not going to get imaged. And so that's my response for that question. And then the next one is going to be one for Dr. Reidel, is going to be which drones work with your software. And I'm sure the answer to that one is probably a wide variety.
Yeah, that's right. So I would say any drone, any aircraft is probably going to work with our platform, although we recommend rotor aircraft such as quadcopters, or in some cases hexacopters, but mostly quadcopters. And then the camera, we have many cameras in our database that are compatible with the software, and we are adding more all the time. So like you said, Galen, feel free to reach out and we can discuss specifics with you.
Thank you. And then the next one, I think also, I mean, it's probably more directed towards you and your work with Progeny, is have you guys worked on, or have anyone that is working with Progeny worked on disease detection?
So disease detection is something that is of interest to us, and I believe that there are some applications that can help you detect disease symptoms from aerial images. We'd be happy to explore that further, and we are doing so. So it may be something that we can measure with the vegetation index, or there's also the possibility that the plot clips, the multiple individual images of each plot within the field trial, those can be exported to third-party programs as well. So there may be a machine learning application, for example, that somebody has developed for detecting a disease.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And as far as handheld measurements are concerned, yes, our devices have been used in multiple studies. Lots of our instruments have been used to look at disease detection, including the root imagers, looking at HGB and citrus. And we also have the SpectraView being used to see if they can do early disease detection as well, using the NIR spectroscopy and building chemometric models and looking at the raw spectra. So lots of cool applications for the handheld as well, as far as disease detection is concerned. If you have a specific question about a specific disease, please feel free to reach out. The next question is, can you make measurements on a particular species if they are growing amongst other species?
Okay, that sounds like one for Progeny drone.
Yep.
And Sarah, that is a tricky one. So it's hard to differentiate green pixels when the plants are intermixed within an image. One thing that we're hopeful to be able to do is take advantage of different properties of the plants. So for example, height could be a possibility where the species of interest may grow higher than the lower species, or some kind of stratification of the canopy. In that case, we can do it. And then there's also the option to select a measurement zone if you're working in field trials. And so you select a narrow measurement zone, and at early stages, at least, the other species should not appear on that line that you've chosen to measure in. So that can help to exclude some of the species that are not the target.
Right. And then the situation arises where there is, this is a great example of how the handheld measurements can provide the complementary data. If you're finding that there's just no way to differentiate between the two, then you can always go in and measure by hand as well. The next question is from Sylvia. It says, have you tried this on crops such as sugarcane, and would you like to test your system in Jamaica? Sylvia, I'll go ahead and say you should probably reach out directly to Dr. Reidel or Dr. Hurst and schedule a consultation with them so that they can discuss this specific application with you. The next question is, this is actually a good one. Do you guys have some example data sets available for people to do image analysis with Plot Phoenix?
Yes, we do. We actually supply some image sets to our customers for training purposes before they get started with their own data so that they're ready to go as soon as their field season begins and they start acquiring images.
Awesome, thank you. The next question is a great specific question for you guys. It is from William, and it says, for flying at a height of about 10 meters, I've noticed consumer level drones like the Mavic 2 Pro do not maintain altitude well, and they can drift down to nearly ground level. One solution is to stop the flight and restart it again during a mission. Does Plot Phoenix mitigate this issue?
Thanks for the question, William. I have not heard of this problem before. What I will say is that Plot Phoenix is not a drone flight control software. Those are sourced through third parties, and there are several that we're aware of that can work with the Mavic 2 Pro. So if you'd like to contact us, we could suggest a flight planning and mission planning software that maybe will work better with your setup.
All right, and thank you for that answer. The next question from Michael is, you mentioned the usefulness of RGB cameras, but you also mentioned NDVI and other multispectral measurements and lower resolution trade-off between multispectral and RGB. And then the question is, can you summarize pros and cons of cameras that collect NIR and what use cases tend to take you to multi-spec cameras?
Okay, this question from Michael is the topic for another completely separate webinar. So I think it's a bit beyond the scope of what we can do today. General guidelines are that RGB cameras provide higher spatial resolution, and multispectral cameras are generally much lower spatial resolution. So the level of detail does provide some advantages. And the multispectral are narrow band, whereas the RGB is a wide band. So an RGB sensor is a multispectral sensor, and it's just a multispectral sensor that's designed to measure wide bands within the red, green, and blue portions of the visible spectrum. So it's not necessarily a hard and fast distinction between RGB and multispectral.
Right.
And like I said, the pros and cons are really not clear. I think people assume that multispectral is better. I don't know, it could be because it's expensive, because it's gotten a lot of attention in the press. But from the whole time that people have been measuring vegetation from the air, whether it was satellites or fixed wing aircraft or UAVs, people have always been able to measure vegetation properties with both systems. So please sign up for our mailing list, and we will notify you when we do that next webinar.
Awesome. Thank you for that. The next question is another one directed to you guys, and this is a question from Scienton, and it says, how does Plot Phoenix georeference field orthomosaics if there is no GCP and GPS?
Hey, Anthony, could you turn on your mic and answer this question, please?
Sure. No problem, Edwin. You're doing great. So basically, Plot Phoenix does georeference the orthomosaics that it generates after stitching your images. However, the absolute accuracy of the georeferencing is only going to be as good as the GPS that's on your drone. So usually it's standard low-grade GPS that we're working with. That being said, it turns out that you do not need very good absolute accuracy of georeferencing in order to extract your plots from your imagery and do your analysis and have all of your outputs, labeled by plot number. So we basically found a way to bypass the need for, centimeter level accurate GPS. You really just don't need it for plot level work.
Thanks, Anthony.
Sure.
Thank you. That was a great answer. And then the next question is regarding the mini risotron system, the CI 600 and 602. The question is, how much efficiency is there to select root information on one click in images collected using the mini risotron? And so that's a great question. This is something that's highly desired by everyone that studies roots, is a system that has automated AI root tracing. And so there are some softwares out there that are starting to explore this. As far as their efficacy, I'm not 100% confident in them quite yet. I think that there's still a little bit ways to go in that AI technology. But I do believe that in the near future, we will finally have a system like that where the manual root tracing is no longer going to be required. But I don't think that the technology is quite there yet. So for now, you still do, unfortunately, have to manually trace. I am sorry to say. And the last question here on this, that's open on this Q&A here is, does Progeny software work on thermal images? Interesting question.
Yes. So the short answer is yes. There are some catches involved with this. Thermal imagery tends to be extremely low resolution, so much lower than multispectral. So that's one challenge, is getting any spatial resolution. And in order to do this, I'm pretty sure Anthony will correct me, but we would need an RGB map in order to overlay the thermal imagery, because you won't get enough detail from a thermal image in order to grid and map your trial. And another thing is calibration. So you would need to have in the field some kind of thermal calibration targets, which could be, for example, water of a known temperature in a container or something along those lines. So that's another tricky part of it as well. It is possible, if you can co-register the thermal and RGB imagery, you can map out the relative thermal signal, but you would not have the absolute degree centigrade or degree Fahrenheit values to go along with that. So that is something that needs more development to have a good system for going out and doing. Still, people are going out and doing it. And so it should progress rapidly. Go ahead, Anthony.
I just want to add a little bit. That was great, Edwin. Just for clarification, for example, we support the MicaSense Altum sensor, which is multispectral, but also includes a thermal band. We actually have a tutorial on our website showing how to deal with that. Essentially, it's like Edwin described. We can stitch imagery from one camera that's high resolution and piggyback off of that to extract your thermal imagery. But our system is generalized to work with any sort of camera rig that includes high resolution and thermal imagery being captured in sync simultaneously. So there's a few different ways to do that. We'd be happy to talk to you more and see what you're working with. But and Phoenix is also set up to calibrate thermal imagery to temperature values if you have those kind of ground targets like Edwin mentioned.
Awesome. Looks like we got one more question in here actually while we were answering that one. And that's just a question about the CI 602 versus the CI 600. Is the CI 602 more advanced than the CI 600? And in some ways, yes, it is. The fact that it does go to up to 1200 DPI resolution, whereas the CI 600 is limited to a 600 DPI resolution. The CI 602 is also a smaller diameter, and so that might help more applications. It also fits into BART's tubes. So if you already have tubes from the BART system installed, you can easily use the CI 602 that fits inside those tubes. And so those are the two major differences between the two models. And then I just want to reiterate, for anyone that's still on, if you do have specific questions, especially on the Progeny drone side of things, if you have specific questions about types of drones or pricing of drones or how your specific application can fit in with using Plot Phoenix and drone automated, drone, data collection, please feel free to reach out to them. Contact Dr. Hurst or Dr. Reidel personally via their email, or reach out on their website to schedule a consultation with them. They're obviously more than happy to answer these questions about these specific applications. And then if you do have questions about the ground-based measurement side of things, then feel free to reach out to us, to my email, or on our website. So you can schedule a consultation easily just by clicking the button on our website, on our homepage at the top of the website. So if you do want to request a quote, if you want pricing information for anything, please click that tiny URL that is in the chat. And thank you everyone so much for participating. A big thank you to Dr. Reidel and Dr. Hurst for being here to talk about their work with drones and how that can help with the small plot trial work. A big thank you to everyone that is participating and that was asking questions, everyone that was engaged in this webinar. Really appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you again soon.